Hello everyone, my name is Josh and welcome to Whims. And today I'm going to give you another review in my IMDb greatest films of all time list. The usual suspects. This is part of my, trying to get the previous entries that were featured on the last poll, and this is probably one of the last ones that I'll do before I roll it all over to you guys again. So what this particular film is it's a film written by Christopher McQuarrie, and it's a film about a group of thieves who, after being involved in a trumped up charge and being part of a lineup, they are integrated into this much larger plot to essentially destroy a boat full of drugs for an anonymous client of a man named Kobayashi, who in turn is named Kaiser Soze. And that's just the basic, very simple principle of what the entire film is, because the framing device of this entire film is the aftermath of that drug bust, effectively, on this boat that's basically been destroyed, and, all evidence removed of any kind of, killings that have taken place there. And one character by the name of Roger Verbal Kint, played by Kevin Spacey, is essentially giving testimony to a New York cop, or a New York police detective by the name of David Coulion, who is trying to get the gist of what went down there, who was killed, how were they killed, because he seems to have it in for a guy by the name of Dean Keaton, who is played by Gabriel Byrne, and he wants him dead for whatever reason, because he was a corrupt cop, and apparently it is hinted at that they have a previous history, and he knows stuff about David Coulion that he wants to remain buried. So the whole entire theme of this film, by and large, is who can you trust? And I really do like the fact that this film, from the word go, is immediately trying to give you this sense of, okay, there's something larger at work here. Because I really do like that one of the police detectives in charge of the Los Angeles sector of the police department, by the name of Jeffrey Ravin, says to David Coulion that the guy who we've got in here to interrogate is on a almost, godlike status where he's got diplomatic immunity. He's also looking at, changing his name and changing his location after this is over, and he's even at worst he's going to serve 5 months, and he seems to have like the hand of the prince of, and he was a witness or a person who was there during the destruction of the boat that contained all these so-called drugs when the film first begins, effectively. And he seems to have the hand of the devil touching on his shoulder at this very minute, he says. So it's almost like they're almost hinting that there's this larger story of a supernatural being in play. But what's very interesting is that this film isn't supernatural at all. There's no supernatural figures. There's no overarching theme of darkness or depravity. It's not like Angel Heart, where there is a deeper, darker twist at play in this story. What really is simply at play is that these small-time crooks are basically being paid by their blackmailer, who is this unknown figure by the name of Kaiser Soze, to type these loose ends so that we can all walk away happy. That's effectively what's being played here. But what's very interesting is that Kaiser Soze has no intention of having these men walk away with any kind of money in their pocket. He's essentially going there for the intent of killing them off, because as his lawyer very famously says in the film, one cannot be portrayed if they have no people. And that's effectively what happens. But because these men have had various different dealings with each other and with various different people in the police and various other people throughout their entire years as criminals and informants for the local police department, they have a ton of different things going on, and they have a ton of different people who could be screwing them over. That's why they're always very paranoid. So when Verbal Kint is propositioning Keaton, who played by Gabriel Byrne, to effectively engage in this one last hurrah heist for this job that they're doing, which is essentially to get a precious cargo for a guy called Redfoot, to get further information on various different things that are going on with this particular client that's going on, this Kobayashi fella. they actually are basically playing it as though, oh yes, we can actually do this, and I know how to do it, so just follow my lead. As long as you do exactly what I say when I say it, everything's going to be okay. You get to go back to your life, Keaton, with this lawyer that you've set up shop with, and everything's going to be okay. But the problem is this person who he's actually hired to essentially do this job knows one of the people who are actually involved in this particular story, and they know that, you know, they can't trust anyone effectively. So this person doesn't know anything. This person who they've hired this precious cargo to go and get doesn't know anything, whether it's diamonds or whether it's money. But then at the same time, there's also a hint that there is something else going on, because there's also a character who potentially knows who Kaiser Soze is. But before he can actually reveal who's who, he gets killed and dies effectively. And they all die with a gunshot to the head. So that's almost like, you know, Kaiser Soze's signature. When you see a character who almost has, you know, like a bullet hole in the head, you know it's the handiwork of Kaiser Soze. So that's very interesting that there's an entire network of things that are going on. But what's very interesting is we get all of this from the point of view of one person. And this person is by the name of Verbal Kint, who is played by Kevin Spacey, and he seems to know everything about what's been going on, who dies, and where to find them, and where to find the money, and where all the rest of it is. But fun fact, you don't really know if he's actually telling the truth, because when you, and spoiler alert for the entirety of this film, because there's a lot of stuff going on, and this film, I am going to be quite honest, this film confused the hell out of me when I first watched it. Like, it was one of those films where it was like, okay, is this all actually what we're seeing, or is this all sort of like an invention? And to a certain degree, the quickest answer to that question is yes, this film is all an invention by one man. But there's not really all that much. There's only so much inventing that he does in order to get what he wants. But the point is that all four of these men were played to carry out this deal, because Kaiser Soze is the devil on their shoulder. He's the guy who's guiding them through all of this. But at the end of it, when all is said and done, they're basically expendable. They're people with targets on their back. For lack of a better word, this film's a better version of a Suicide Squad type film. Because once they've done what they need to do, they're going to effectively just be killed by the end of it. And I really did like this film. At first I was genuinely confused about the plot, but then I thought to myself, knowing the twist, do you really have to pay attention to every single detail going in? And to a certain degree you do. Certain lines of dialogue you need to pay attention to, because that's important to knowing who these characters are, what they're all about. But in many cases there are certain details that you just don't need to know. Like, say for example, the fact that, you know, that Verbal Kint used to be a part of a barbershop quartet when he was back in New York once upon a time, but because of certain things, that he makes particular notice of a guy who used to be, you know, Orca Fat, a guy who used to do baritone and things like that. Like, certain little details like that don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But there are certain details, like, say, for example, the idea that this guy seems to be touched by the devil himself. Like, he seems to have the devil himself on his shoulder. He's so lucky, but then he's so unlucky at the same time, because there's something evil following him. And it turns out that there's more truth to that statement than a lot of people realise, because there's a lot of stuff going on with Verbal Kint that not many people tend to realise until it eventually confronts them right in the face. And I really do like the fact that both of these men are suspects in being Kaiser Soze, because when we first meet them, especially when we meet Verbal Kint, they're shown under almost like a white light, and you almost seem to associate the white light with a certain degree of angelicness, like a certain degree of, oh, these guys are saints, these guys are incredibly lucky. And to a certain degree that is the truth, because all of these men, despite being criminals, they are also in the pockets of the police department. So you can almost say that it's almost like that there's a literal white light, in the sense that they're lucky in the sense that they're in the pockets of the police, so they won't serve time. If they are going to serve time, it's going to be a very small stretch. But in the grand scheme of things, they're also kind of unlucky in the sense that this white light can't save them forever. And I actually do like the fact that in the film, when we get to the climax of the film, the white light is used to almost kind of show Kaiser Soze without showing him, if that actually makes any kind of sense at all. But if you're confused in any way by my trying to explain this film, join the club, because I felt that same way when I first watched this film, where it is kind of a little bit confusing. But what I really like about it is you really do feel like you can't trust anybody. Even when you think you have a character pinned down, there's always going to be something that makes you kind of go, oh, I don't trust this character now, or I don't trust where this is going. And that's deliberately done to kind of make you go, okay, I'm into this plot, even though I'm totally confused the first time round. Because it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Those little details, like the barbershop quartet thing, doesn't really matter. But what really matters is Kaiser Soze, this drug baron from Turkey, is pissed at these thieves for stealing the things that he needs to get his drug business up and running effectively. So he's basically saying, okay, we both shit the bed, but we can help each other out. If you do this for me, get rid of this trail that I've basically left untethered, then I'll help you out and give you a shit ton of money, and then we can get out of this. And that's effectively what happens there. And it's such a great misdirect, because in many ways Kaiser Soze doesn't give a shit about these men. He will essentially kill anybody as long as it keeps him out of the firing line and he doesn't get detected by the police. As long as he's out of the firing line of the police, he doesn't care what happens to these men. So he can make up anything that he wants. But the script is actually very intelligent. It's very funny in a lot of places, but it's also very deliberately very confusing, because the film is designed to make you second guess things and make you kind of go, okay, this feels strange. I'm not really sure about this person. But in the grand scheme of things, you don't really know where to turn. And it's very great that this sort of screenplay was allowed to be made, because in reality, this film has a very kind of deliberately so, very noir, 1940s noir-esque feel to it. Because a lot of the characters do have kind of like these very old world type voices. The way they speak is very fast, and there's a lot of information being thrown at you. There's a lot of information about internal world characters being thrown at you, but it's all done in greater service to show that this is all an illusion. Because the one person who is telling all of this is the one person who we have to take his word for. How it happened is how he says it happened. Because in reality, he could be telling the truth, he could be lying. And it all comes together at the end with the twist. And the big twist is that Verbal Kint made up the whole thing. And to a certain degree, we don't really know, but we know that he made up some details to get it past the police. But then some details he might have, been telling the truth on. And there's so many ways in which you could look at it. But what's very interesting is that Kaiser Soze, or Verbal Kint, or Roger Verbal Kint, whatever you want to call him, he is effectively a ghost. And what I really like is that Agent Coulion completely and utterly was played for a fool at the end of this film, because effectively he knows how to identify a killer. He says he's been doing it for years. He's trained to know who a killer is just by looking at them from the second they walk in the door. But in reality, he doesn't. All this stuff he says is completely utterly nonsense, because in all honesty, he doesn't know how to identify a killer, because there's always new tricks you have to learn. And Kaiser Soze completely utterly throws him through the roof. But what I really like about the film is there's so many quotable bits of dialogue. I love the line, a man can't be betrayed unless when he has no people. That's such a great line, because in reality, that's what Kaiser Soze effectively does. And I have a very fun fan theory that Kaiser Soze and Kobayashi are effectively, partners, gay lovers, and they basically created this entire story so they could basically, turn all the, horrible thieves, murderers, and what have you against each other, so they can just basically ride off into the sunset and go on their honeymoon once and for all. That's just my fun little fan theory, but that's just me. But yeah, I really did like this film. It was a great cast. Gabriel Byrne, Stephen Baldwin, Kevin Spacey, so many great actors, Pete Postlethwaite. so many great cast members, but the script was very well done. It had a very 1940s-esque flavour. And I just really think the film, by and large, when you first watch this film, it's very easy to be intimidated by the amount of information being given to you. But what I really like is when you slow down and you actually really start to watch it multiple times, multiple viewings, and you see the twist, you do kind of find yourself thinking, not everything is meant to go up here. Certain things are meant to be just tossed to the side and say, oh, okay, that was just a little detail. But even the little details that may seem like nothing do turn out to be something. And it's actually really kind of interesting. Even the idea of one of the police detectives being a total slob in how he kind of, arranges a lot of his paperwork. Even that comes up at some point in the beginning that makes you kind of go, oh, okay, this is how it's meant to be. And what I really like is that the line that one of the cops gives to Dean Keaton, aka Gabriel Byrne's character, when they say, "You tell us about the weapons, dead man," that actually works as a very interesting double entendre, because in many cases he is a dead man in the sense that we see him die at the very start of the film, the very prologue of the film, we see him die. But then it's also kind of interesting that was his plan from the word go, that he was planning on faking his own death so that he could change his identity and become somebody else. That's why Agent Coulion, David Coulion, is planning on pinning him for all of the crimes that he stands accused of, including the hijacking of the truck full of weapons, because Coulion knows him as a colleague. He knows him from years past, so that he basically... But part of me feels like Coulion is not a good person either, because part of me feels like he's just as much a criminal as the people that he puts away. But what I really like about it is a good script gives you enough of a world to explore to the point where even the small details have... I suppose it has enough relevance to make you go, oh, I wonder what this person's life was like. But it's not enough to make you kind of go, oh, it needs to be explained to make the film feel whole, if that makes sense. Like, Coulion's entire backstory, especially him working with the police, is meant to give you the impression that the entire system is corrupt. Not just one or two people, but the entire system is corrupt. And the idea that element is a feature in this film is quite an interesting idea, because Coulion is just as much corrupt as Dean Keaton is. So effectively, he wants to remove his doppelganger so that he can, continue doing what he's doing. But in many ways, he's doing it to save his own skin, because once he's got Kaiser Soze, who knows what could happen. But in many cases, he could be the next Kaiser Soze, for all we know, because he's that corrupt. But what I really think is interesting is that you don't know what he has on, what Keaton had on him to make him want him dead so badly. Because it's like, the world building is so solid that it kind of makes you kind of think, that's good screenwriting when it gives you those details, but then it makes you turn around and say, oh, well, what's in it for this guy? What's in it for this guy? Is it a promotion? Is it all these other things? What is in it for Coulion to have Keaton dead? Or what does it have on him? What does he get out of it with Kaiser Soze caught? It's one of those interesting details that makes me think, this script is really good, this script is very intelligently written, and I think people who love crime stories, especially the noir-esque crime stories like Chinatown or anything like that, should watch this film, because it really does give you that sense of a classical 1940s noir, but it's done in the 90s, it's done when it was made. And I like the fact that there are two films that are starring Kevin Spacey that have him play the villain effectively. But what's very interesting is that he plays the villain and there's also a genius twist at the end of it. The first one was Seven, which I've also covered on this channel, but then the other one is this. And I really do like this film. But that's my review for The Usual Suspects, and I want you guys to do something for me now. You can talk to me about what you thought of this film down in the comments below. You could go spoilerish or you could go non-spoilerish. But what I really want you guys to do now is I want you guys to give me a number between 250 and 1. And whatever number comes up first in the comments will be the next review that I do for my IMDb greatest films of all time list. So if you guys can do that, please do so. And if you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more, please click on the subscribe button for more. And this has been my review for The Usual Suspects 1995. And this has been Josh with Whims. I hope you're all doing very well. Take care. Bye for now.